Jennifer, proceed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone. We're so happy to have you join us in today's session. To start, we'll do a very quick round of introductions. Quickly, I can tell you right here on the screen, we've got our kind of key points of contact for the eMERGE project. Dr. Anita Raj is our primary investigator and a professor at the University of California, San Diego. She's also the director of the Center on Gender Equity and Health. Joining us today for the purposes of this presentation, we have Arnab Dey, Jennifer Cully, myself, Jennifer Yor, Namrata Rao, who is our point of contact for the South Asia portfolio, but she's also now engaged in a broader range of the work that we're conducting as part of the eMERGE project, as well as Elettra Baldi. And I did want to share with you all that we are working on making sure we have some polling questions to share with you. So if you could please just keep an eye out. We'll try to flag for you when those become available. Next slide. Okay, this is the first one. For our colleagues in Kenya, the first poll that we have regarding expectations, if you are able to launch that one at this time, we could give everyone a minute or two to respond.
Sorry, Jennifer, unfortunately, it's still not picking the question.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Elettra, would you mind populating the link into the chat and we can share that with everyone so that they could log in, or I'm sorry, they can just click the link in the chat, and then it should generate a screen where you can provide your responses. Thanks, Elettra. I'm just realizing, Jen Cully, when we generate the polls, can you pop them up? Can you click into it really quickly so that we can see it on the screen so others can see them as they're being responded to? And if anyone's having difficulty, it looks like you might need, Elettra, can you chime in here? Do they need to click over to view the question?
Yeah, from Q&A, you switch over to polls.
Okay.
I'm getting some responses.
And Jennifer, can you click over to polls as well? Thanks. Okay, great. So really quickly, we'll take a look at the poll responses we have at this point. In terms of what people would like to get out of today's webinar, it's pretty clear. There's interest in finding and creating measures, which is perfect because that's what we're here for. But also some interest expressed in how to publish as well. On our previous question, oh, go ahead, Jen. I'm gonna let you go ahead and respond to that so that it'll generate the findings. Yep, okay, most people have not developed a measure for the survey. That's really helpful. So Jen, can you go back to the previous screen, or I'm sorry, not to the presentation? Okay, we can click past that that slide, but thank you all for putting that information into the chat. So the eMERGE website, we've populated the web address up there for you all. It's emerge.ucsd.edu, and it's an open access one-stop shop. It's a resource and a toolkit for researchers and program implementers globally to access measures across various domains that take into consideration measurement through a gender lens. Next slide. Okay, you can click. We'll talk today about what eMERGE is and how to find and select WE measures, as well as how to create WE measures. Next. This is just our logo, so there we go. All right, so I'm sure many of you are already aware of why this is important. This work is aiming at addressing the fact that with SDG 5, only 20% of indicators have applicable measurement. We're working to try to address various gaps identified in the field of gender measurement and support the development of robust and valid measurement for GEE measures. And this is because there's been a need identified for standardizing and sharing definitions of gender equity and empowerment and how to effectively collect data that considers various domains and gaps. I'm sorry, gaps with a gender lens. Also, full disclosure, you guys, I have twin toddlers, and it is very early in the morning here, so we are currently navigating that at the moment. But next slide. The eMERGE project. eMERGE stands for Evidence-Based Measures of Empowerment for Research on Gender Equality. Our aims are to compile, evaluate, and improve global gender equality empowerment survey measurement. And this platform exists to be able to find best evidence GEE survey measures, to learn about survey measurement, and to be able to share your measures when that time comes. Next slide. So we work to identify measures used in the field, to train scholars and researchers in measurement science, to create opportunities for measures development, and to access measures on eMERGE. We've been working now for a number of years to collect these, so we're slowly building a pretty significantly sized repository for you all to use. Next slide. In addition, we're working to build bridges between scientists and practitioners in the hopes that the research that's being conducted and the findings from that research, or the data collected from these monitoring and evaluation efforts, can inform operational research, but also inform decision-making related to policy development. Next slide. To date, we've had collaborators in various areas, including large-scale survey researchers. We have worked to develop and test new measures around agency, and with the advent of the pandemic, COVID. We've also provided small grants in the past to develop and test constructs of COVID-19 and gender norms. Next slide. These are just, the next couple slides are just sharing previous collaborations and partnerships that we've had. And you can click through those, Jen. Okay, we are in a position to offer the pretest questions. Electra, if you could share that link for those questions, and we'll give just a minute or two. Thanks, Electra. So everyone, these are the expectations questions to find out a little bit, or not expectations, the pre-post evaluation for this to kind of determine where we stand. Please know this is provided anonymously, and so we're just asking to get an idea of kind of where people's areas of expertise and background are. Okay, thanks. All right, thanks, Jennifer. And we'll pop out of that and back into the slide presentation. And you all can continue to respond to the poll through that link. All right, next slide. So really quickly, the idea here is that we're trying to determine what's missing from national surveys and gender measurement programmatically, and we want interested in or what are key areas in your country context or measures that are inadequately assessing your country's needs. And so for that purpose, we are constantly trying to identify existing measures, but also trying to learn about new and developing measures so that those can be incorporated into the eMERGE platform. Next slide. All right, and I will hand over to Jennifer Cully. She will be providing the walkthrough of the site and how to find and identify measures for your needs.
Hi, everyone. One of the research coordinators at the Center on Gender Equity and Health working on the eMERGE program. And I just kind of wanted to give a quick walkthrough of the site to kind of give some tips and tricks on how to navigate the website, as well as how to find the measure of interest that you might be looking for. Okay, so in order to make this kind of a live presentation, I will show you the actual website itself. So I'll just kind of navigate over there. Okay, so this is our website, which is emerge.ucsd.edu. This is our homepage. It should show up looking just like this for now. We can navigate through the homepage here. We have some information about the current measures that are on our site. And presently, we have about 800 measures currently on display. This is a constantly changing number. So kind of, you may, each week you may see some new additions as well. So make sure to keep checking. And like I said, with 800 measures, it can be a little bit tricky to find the exact measure you might be looking for, whether you have one in mind in particular, or just trying to find something that meets your needs, whether it's thematic or based on a country of interest. So one of the first ways I will show you how to measure is using our homepage. On the top, the top bar here, you will see an option to explore measures. That will be kind of a good starting place in order to look by themes. So our measures are divided into what we call domains. We currently have 10 different domains on this top banner, and they are organized into subgroups here as well. So this is kind of a good spot to kind of look through what are the different areas of interest that we have on the on the site, you can see that we have a very large and wide breadth of different measures ranging from health to politics, economics. And if using this as a starting place, a good way might be just to kind of look and see what are some of our subcategories. And I believe that one of our areas of interest that we're looking into today is time use. So one way would be to just kind of navigate through women's economic empowerment, and we're going to choose time use here. So that will automatically take you to the search results here. You will see on the left side is the search will ask what will show what our responses are, and then on the right will be all of our measures that pertain to that particular domain. As you can see, there's quite a few. They're based by title here. So that is one way to kind of look at what are some of the measures based on that domain. Also on the search bars as here, there are some particular filters that you can add to your search. You can filter by psychometric scores, which is something that we are going to get into a little bit later in our presentation. We have options of how we score our using psychometrics, which we'll get into later, but just for now, the important piece is that we have high, low, medium, and measures that do not have psychometric scoring. The next option we have is to filter by countries. All of our countries that have measures have been listed here. So you can filter, add, you're working with time use, we can add a particular country here as well. Any measure that was tested in multiple countries, you can search by that as well. So if you want a single country, we would say no. If you want to look at something that was implemented in a larger, multi-regional, multi-country, you can add that here. And then you can also filter by a short measure. So if it's a measure that has 5 items or less, that is what we classify as a short measure. So let's go back to our search here. So we're working on time use.
Jennifer, could I pause here just for one moment?
Of course.
Does anyone, I would like to open it up just for a second, because I know we're moving quite quickly through things in the name of time. And so we, on our side, we'll try to slow down a little bit. But does anyone have questions at the moment that they want to add into the chat about getting to this point? If so, throw them in the chat. We'll check again in a moment. But Jen will be walking through that process again that she just reviewed, but with a specific measure in mind to identify it. Okay, handing back over, Jen.
Great. Yes, thank you. Yes, please continue to put questions in the chat. So we're working with currently we have time use, and let's say we want to filter a little bit more. We want to look at something time use, and we want to look for a measure that could be tested in Kenya. So we'll add that filter, or we could also search by time use. We could say multi-country, any option here just to kind of, narrow down some options as well. So this is option 1 of how to search. Another option is whether if your needs are not being met with these options that are here. We also have the option to do a keyword search if you're looking for a search term that is not in one of these dimensions and domains. So we can just go to the search page, which is also, just note, is on the upper right-hand corner from any of the pages on Emerge. We would just open up the search page. It would start us with a fresh search. So one of the, let's say, for example, we want to put on economic agency. We'll search there. And our options will populate on the right here. So it's a little bit different method of search, and kind of just depends on what your needs are in that in that moment. We can also, let's say we want something that has a high psychometric score on economic agency. We could also search if you want to add also medium and high. Every piece that you add will like be an additional piece. So you can search high and medium. If you want to just search medium, we can, you can use that little X here. Something to note is that our dimensions and domains here are not mutually exclusive. So if there's something, as many of our measures do not just cover one topic, they cover a wide variety of topics. So if you're looking for something in economic empowerment, it could also be a health related measure. So that's just a note to use when you are searching. So we've kind of walked through two different ways of searching for a measure. I want to open it up and in the chat, if you have any particular curiosity about a search term, kind of something you may want to see us walk through together, please put any keyword searches of interest into the chat, and we'll do a search. Wonderful. Okay, great. We can keep bringing in responses as we move forward, but these are great. We have a few options here. Actually, unpaid care is perfect. We have a particular I believe it's under household relations. We actually have a dimension here for unpaid care, so that's perfect. Let's see, financial access as well. That one might be a good one to search. Let's start fresh here. And perfect, yes, thank you, Namratha. We can absolutely search by particular age groups as well. So, adolescent measures first, absolutely. Arnab, I like the suggestion of employment. Let's go with employment. Perfect. And you can see there's a wide variety based on the terms that we use. We make it 20 responses. There may be just one or two that fit. And if you have a result that has many different measures, it's a great opportunity to just use some of those filters. So now that we kind of know how to search, let's take a look at what some of these measure pages look like. So, and every measure that you have will bring up a new tab. So you can kind of go back and forth between the search results and some of our measure pages. So to just walk you through a little bit about what we have on our measure pages. So this is a DHS measure, which many of us may be familiar with. We begin with just a short description of the measure here, just a few sentences just to kind of give an overview. We then extract certain information from the measure. We extract the items as well as response options here. And then if we have any particular scoring procedure that is given to us in order to create the summative score of the measure, that will be provided here, as well as the primary citation. So if there's any further information that you need about the measure, you'd like to reach out to an author maybe, or go to the original citation, that it will always be provided here in the primary citation. And if we scroll back up here, there's some other information as well. We'll circle back to this psychometric score piece as well as our citation frequency, but we will also have certain categories. We'll have all of our countries where it was tested here, the populations, including gender, as well as the age ranges of where this measure was tested. This is one type of the measures that we have. Another type of measure that we have, let's see, would be, let's go to this one here, Job Self-Efficacy Index. The main difference between one of the measures that we just looked at, the DHS measure, and this one here is this psychometric scoring portion, as well as our citation frequency. Our citation frequency is our Google Scholar, how many times this measure has been cited in other research. And our psychometric score, this is what we're going to talk about in terms of how we score in later on in the presentation. But psychometric scoring, we give different, we have different categories based on our scoring methodology that we use. We'll have a low, medium, high here if we have availability of providing that psychometric score based on the primary citation. Scrolling down to the bottom of the page, this will be the breakdown of how we scored our measures here. We have our category for formative research, reliability, as well as validity. Our scoring breakdown, the total number of points that were given, as well as for each category, what we gave to the score. So that's something that we will go back to. And if there's any questions on how we created this psychometric score, our scoring methodology page right here tells us a really great breakdown of exactly how we create this score, to just be as transparent as possible in terms of that piece. So those are some of the main aspects of a measure page. We have kind of two different variations here. So these are kind of great things to, what we would like to, kind of our goal is to provide all of the information that you could need to administer a survey on your own, but always refer back to the primary citation if there's, any further information that you could need from this. There's a cool feature that we is currently under construction, but we will be able to hopefully by the next time you come back to the website, there is the option to download measure, which will download a file of the of all information here. And another great feature, if you are deciding between different measures and want to kind of compare several different measures at once, and you can download on the search page this entire list of measures. So it will extract all that information into the Excel file. So you can have that for your own records. And you can kind of compare multiple different measures if you're deciding between a few. And then there's so much more to explore on eMERGE besides just the measures here. We have some great resources here. We have some more information on how to find the measure that you need. We're going to be recording this presentation, but if there's something else that you, if you would like to refer back to this. And one other page I wanted to show you that might be of particular interest is our special topics page on women's economic empowerment. We have many different special topics, kind of depending on what are some of the hot topics of the moment, or where is some of our research where is eMERGE focused on in a particular moment, which obviously has a wide variety, but some of them, these special topics pages really break down that particular topic. So, and I know that women's economic empowerment is of particular interest to this group. So just wanted to highlight this page a little bit. We have some internal eMERGE reports here, as well as some modules that were, these are recommended, these are kind of some recommended items and measures that we recommend using here. And there's some kind of great things to play around with, as well as kind of a breakdown of where the geographical distribution of our measures of women's economic empowerment, as well as the psychometric scores of all of these. Great. Let's see. Are there any questions? about the search. All of this information will be in the PowerPoint that we will share with you as well, with a kind of breakdown of screenshots of how to do this. Let's see. All right, measure components of measure pages, 2 types of measures and examples. Great, any questions at this time? You can also keep putting questions into the chat box throughout the presentation today, and we'll be monitoring that. And if we don't get a chance to answer it today on our call, we will answer it. We can answer things over email if you reach out to us directly.
Jennifer, this is Jen. Do you mind going back? Can you do another sort of walkthrough of the resources page and also where people can submit measures if they're creating them?
Absolutely. Yes. So our resources page, we have all of our internal work is here. These are a lot of our project reports can be found here, as well as some external resources broken down by indices, indicators. We have some surveys, reports, all of that is here in order. If there's anything that doesn't necessarily have a measure page, resources here to look. And in terms of submitting a measure, if there is a measure that either you have developed personally or would be of that you've used in your research that you don't see on Emerge, if you ever have a measure that you would like to recommend for use to us, you can submit a measure. So that's under the resources page, and then submit a measure. And that's this is where you can submit to us, and we receive all of these requests. Are there any other questions at this time? Great. Well, I think I will hand over to Arnab at this time. I continue. If there's any questions that do come up as we are moving forward, feel free to put those in the chat. But for now, I will hand it over to Arnab, who will go through a little bit more of the psychometrics that we have been talking about a little bit for our measures. So Arnab, take it away.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening to you all. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about how to create new WEE measures. What I'll do now, it's actually a pretty broad topic, and it takes a long time to talk about it. There are several aspects, but what I'll do today is to talk and give a brief overview about what measures are, what are the different terminologies that we use to describe different types of measures, scales, indices, and then talk a little bit about psychometric properties that Jennifer had alluded to, and then give a snapshot of the steps that we need to take to create new measures, and talk about a few resources to adapt measures from existing surveys or papers. Can we go to the next slide, please, Jen? All right, so you must have heard a number of different terms when we talk about measurement. So measures, scale, score. What are these? So measures usually mean a set of questions or items that are measuring a construct. So we have, let's say, 5 different questions that ask about time use. One question asks about how much time does a particular person spend on, cooking, and another question asks about how much time a person spends on cleaning. And these sets of questions, they together are called measures, whereas an individual question is called an item. There are different terms that are used to describe measures. So there are scales, there are indices, and there are nuances to each of them. But I think the core idea to keep in mind here is that the unit of an individual question is an item, whereas when several items are used to capture a particular phenomena, uh, that set of questions are called measures or scales. A good measure would have a clear inclusion and exclusion criteria, and the definition for a good measure varies with context, population, and the theory that we are applying to capture that construct. We can go to the next slide, Jeff. So why do we need measures, and why is it so difficult to capture these ideas? So when it comes to measurement, measurement in the pure sciences is easy. We can measure weight, we can measure length, we can measure height. These measurements are pretty standard. They do not need a lot of thinking and a lot of theory. But in social sciences, in the field of, let's say, gender equity, measurement becomes very tricky because a lot of constructs are really difficult to quantify. So some construct can talk about autonomy. Some construct can talk about, let's say, time use or unpaid care or empowerment or agency. All of these constructs are really complex. What autonomy means to me might mean very different things depending on different contexts and different people. So that is the challenge that we face in measuring some of the constructs around gender equity, and that is the reason that we really need to lay a lot of focus on measurement and on creating really robust measures when it comes to women's economic empowerment. We can move on to the next slide. And we talked about this. So items, as I said, are individual questions, and scales are interrelated items. This is actually an important point. So it's not that any individual item or any individual question can be put together. The individual questions need to be related to each other. They must draw from a same construct. So for example, if I'm trying to create a scale for autonomy, all the questions must be related to autonomy, and we'll speak to that in a few minutes. We cannot have one question that is trying to talk about autonomy and then another question that is trying to talk about a completely different construct, let's say empowerment. So the items need to be together when we are trying to develop a skill, so that it captures what we intend to capture. Next slide. Now, what is this? What is the science behind creating good measures? So it can be broken up into two phases. The first phase is really a formative phase where we do our preliminary research. We first sit with our team, with our group, and first identify what is the construct that we are trying to measure. Then we go and try to find what exists in the literature. We sort of develop an initial pool of items that we can test it in the field first, and then maybe launch a larger data collection effort. And then once we have collected data, we need to analyze how reliable and how valid that measure is. And both of these terms, reliability and validity, are parts of the psychometric property of a measure. So reliability and validity essentially are ways to tell how strong a measure is, how robust a measure is. These are the ways that we can scientifically assess the robustness of a measure. Going forward to the next slide. I'll briefly talk about reliability and validity. So the distinction is really clear. Reliability tests how consistent a measure is on repeat applications. So if I have a measure on time use, does it capture the same thing when I apply it over time or in different geographies, or when different people use the same tool to ask questions to different individuals? So reliability is all about consistency. That a measure should be consistent over time. A measure should be consistent when asked by different investigators, and a measure should be consistent internally. By which I mean that the items should be related to each other. The set of items that we include in a measure should not be inconsistent with each other. And we'll see a really good example of that in the next slide. Reliability can, Jen. The reliability can be of two types, internal and external. By internal, we mean how well are the items linked together. And external means that when we apply that same set of items on different contexts or over different periods of time, it should be consistent. Validity, on the other hand, means that it tries to test whether a measure is capturing what we intend to capture. If we want to capture empowerment, is it actually capturing empowerment, or is it other construct? And there are three kinds of validity. This content validity, which means that if a construct has 5 different dimensions, let's say, so our measure should capture all of those 5 different dimensions for it to have content validity. Construct validity means whether a measure on a particular construct is related to some of the other, or some other similar constructs related to that are related to that original construct in theory. And a good example of that is, we apply for job interviews, and if you think of questions asked in a job interview as a measure, then the job interview should actually allow us to identify good candidates, and those good candidates should come into the job and perform good in an organization. So a way to measure construct validity of a job interview questionnaire is to then see whether a selected candidate performs well in his, her, or their jobs or not. So that's construct validity. And then criterion validity is the degree to which a measure is associated with a gold standard measure. So often, depending on the field that we work on, there are gold standard measures which have been tested in multiple contexts, that have been repeated by a lot of researchers independently. And when we come out with a new measure that's slightly different, or that is adapted to our own construct, to our own context, we might want to test our measure and see if it is associated with that gold standard measure that exists in the field. And if it does, then we say that our measure has criterion validity. And we can go to the next slide now to look at a few examples. So here is an example of a measure that has low internal reliability. Remember, internal reliability means how well the items hang together. And so this is a time use example. The first question asks, how much time does it take for you to collect water? Second is about collecting firewood. Third is about collecting household, how much time does it take to perform household chores? And the fourth question is about, what do you do with your free time? Now, in theory, all 4 questions are about time use, are related to time. But you can clearly see that the fourth question is not really hanging well together with the rest of the 3 questions. And if we go to the next slide, we see that, so the fourth question here is the odd one out, right? The first 3 questions are about how much time. The phrasing of the first 3 questions are very similar. It's asking about how much time does it take to do a particular activity. The fourth question is really the odd one out. It's asking about what do you do with your free time. Now the question is related to time. It's related to time use, but adding this question to our measure would make our measure to have poor internal reliability, because all of these four questions do not hang together well. They are not really connected to each other. To increase internal reliability for this measure, I would take the fourth question out of my survey and just keep the first three. Similarly, can you do one more click, Jen? Similarly, another example of a measure with low content validity. Now, remember, low content validity is observed when a particular construct has, let's say, many different dimensions, and our measure does not capture all of those dimensions or aspects. For example, time, when we talk about time use in household chores, household chores can involve cooking and cleaning and buying food and childcare and a lot of different things. Now, for a measure to have content validity, that measure should capture all of these different aspects that are related to time use within the household. If a measure only captures, let's say, cooking and cleaning and buying food and does not capture the aspect of time involved in childcare or unpaid care related to childcare, we cannot say that that measure has high content validity. So content validity, remember, is all about capturing all the different dimensions of a particular construct. If we are missing any major dimension, then we can say that this particular measure has low content validity. So with that, we can now move to the topic of how to build or how to create good measures. And before I even begin, I can tell you that we have some really good resources on creating good measures. Jen, if we can go to the Emerge website and point to the resources page, we have two really excellent sort of reports. Yeah, we can go to reports and frameworks, and the second last and the last guidelines. So measurement guidelines 1 and measurement guidelines 2. They are essentially detailed guides on how to adapt existing measures and how to create existing measures. So report 1 essentially lays out 7 steps of adapting existing measures. If we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see so there are 7 stages that we kind of recommend to adapt previously validated measures. So a lot of times we have the need, we find that in the literature, we find existing and validated measures, and we need to adapt that to our own please feel free to follow these guidelines. And similarly, report 2 talks about how to create new measures. There are oftentimes we'll feel the need that the measure that I'm trying to create, it doesn't exist in the field. Nobody has created a validated a measure that I want to capture. And here these guidelines really come into play. We have like a 10-step approach to create new measures. And we talk about reliability, validity, and then we lay out these 10 steps in quite a bit of detail. So please feel free to refer to these resources. They are absolutely free to use. And I have personally found that when I have to adapt or create new measures, these guidelines really help me quite a lot. So going back to the presentation now, I'll talk very briefly about how to sort of create good measures. This is essentially giving a snapshot of the 10 steps you can easily find on the. To the next slide. So here are steps. So we have a clear. So the first thing that I mentioned, I think a while back, was a clear idea of the construct that this is a step that we often either skip or ignore a lot of times, and we like right on jump to creating the measures. We start talking about the questions that we want to ask, and we start designing questionnaires right away. But I think first of all, it always helps us when we start with a blank page and list down the construct that we are trying to measure. The second step is to conduct formative research to understand the construct really well and to identify potential items. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is the report that I was talking about. And the second step, as I said, was to conduct formative research to understand the construct and potential items. And what formative research involves is we can break it down into three parts. So the first bit is to first do a literature review, uh, identify if there are any gaps in the literature. Uh, and this again relates very closely with the first step. You have narrowed down the construct that you are interested in measuring. There might be similar constructs that have been already asked, but when we did this exercise, we have narrowed down on the specific construct that we want to measure. And now we go and do a literature review to identify what is missing in the field. Are there tools or measures that exactly cater to what I need? Or is there a gap in the field? To give you an example, I think I was looking at the demographic and health survey questionnaires on decision making around contraceptive use. And I think there is a question that talked about, who decides when to have a child, and who decides what kind of contraceptive do you want to use. So that question was related to the area of our research, but the construct that we really wanted to measure was contraceptive autonomy. So we wanted to go beyond the questions of who takes the decision to asking questions like, do you feel empowered to decide on what contraceptives you want to use, or are you satisfied with the level of decision making or the level of power that you have to choose the contraceptive that you want to use? So in this example, the construct that we wanted to measure was slightly different from the construct that the existing questions were measuring. So we identified this gap in the formative research stage, and then we moved on to the next stages, which essentially, is about connecting the constructs that we are interested in with existing theories, with existing frameworks, and then go ahead and do like a little qualitative research in the form of, let's say, cognitive interviews, where we sort of identify like a small group of participants, and we test our theories, we test our questions, and we kind of go ahead and try to find how our questions are, how our questions are being perceived by our respondents. How do they understand the question? How do they interpret the question in their own way? And with that understanding, we come back and go to the next step in the next slide, which is to generate a pool of potential items. Now, this is where I think this is what I was talking about when I said that this is where people generally start. I've seen a lot of people who start right away to generating a pool of potential items for inclusion. And the next step talks about, in the next slide, would talk about how to do that. So depending on the construct that we are interested in, and the findings from our qualitative interviews and literature review, we sort of create this initial pool. We need to be really creative when developing new items. And we can have like a large number of items, because the next stages, in the next stages, we would really cut short these items and really aim for a very lean and a short measure. Okay to start with a large number of items and cut it down later, rather than starting with a small set of items and then realizing that there is a lot of dimensions that we are not capturing. There's a lot of aspects that we did not think of. So just remember, be creative at this stage. We'll have a lot of opportunities to hone the tool at a later stage. And a large number of measures at this, a large number of items at this stage is okay to have. You don't need to really worry about having like too many questions. The next steps would really help us in cutting it down further. So the next step is about deciding on the measurement format. Now, this is really important, where we kind of and where we kind of think about the response options. We think about, whether we want to do like purely quantitative or mix of quantitative and qualitative. Do we want to include vignettes? And it really depends on the construct that we are trying to capture. If you feel that the ideas that you want to understand uh, are cannot be captured purely empirically, maybe we need to think about asking it in the form of vignettes or some other formats. If you think that the constructs are well established, we know what the potential response options are, we can then go ahead and kind of define those response options. And the next slide might talk about one of the biggest challenges that we face at this stage is to define the response options. So what happens is, especially when we are not completely familiar with the context of our research, it might be difficult to come up with response options. So a lot of times questions will have options like yes or no, which is easy to kind of design. Sometimes they have, extent of agreement and disagreement. So strongly agree, somewhat agree, or neither agree or not disagree. Those kinds of questions. So those are easy to create. However, some of the times you'll have to think about response options of your own. So you really don't know what kind of response options would come. And this is exactly the stage where the qualitative research that we had done in the past really comes handy. So we kind of draw from the focus group discussions, the in-depth interviews that we did, and we try to think of, we try to break those responses down into possible response options. We can move to the next step, which is, this is an example of a decision-making questionnaire, but I think we can skip this. We can also skip the pit stop for now. The next step is to have a panel of experts review the item pool. This is ideal. A lot of times it becomes difficult to gather a panel of experts. But if possible, it really leads to a lot of insights. There are a lot of our colleagues who are experts in specific fields, and by talking to them or by having them review our existing pool of questionnaires, we can get a lot of insights into would the response options work, or if we need to rephrase certain items or not. We can move to the next point. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, which is so now we are talking about what to include, or whether to include validation items or not. And is there a next slide on this? No. So validation items is, I'll talk about it briefly. Remember we talked about construct validity, which meant that our measure should be related to existing or related constructs. So if I have a measure on reproductive autonomy, it might be related to contraceptive use, let's say. So decision on inclusion of validation items. So if we want to test validity of our measure at a later stage, we might have to include some of those related constructs in our measure, in our questionnaire, so that we are able to test for validity at a later stage. And the next stage now is to perform cognitive interviews and pilot testing. This is, I think there's a slide for this. Yeah, at this stage, we have like, cognitive interviews can generally take 10 to 20 participants. We are really assessing, how they understand the content, how they interpret the questions. Pilot testing can be with a slightly larger sample size. And we can use data from pilot testing to, since it's a slightly larger sample size than cognitive interviews, we can use some of the data to see if there are variabilities depending on context. We can also run analyses on preliminary analysis on like checking reliability of specific questions, or trying to see if there's constructability based on even a small sample. If we find really absurd results, we might need to sort of change our questions a little bit at this stage as well. And then the next step is to evaluate the individual items on the measure. Is there a slide that details this? Yeah, so evaluating individual items now that we have pilot testing data, we can now look at the responses for each of these questions, and we can then gauge whether the individual items are sort of, are the frequencies sort of matching our expectations, or are we getting a lot of don't knows, or not applicable sort of responses? If that is the case, then we might need to tweak our individual responses a little bit. The next stage is to optimize the length of the measure. This is where it's time to now cut it short, depending on the resources that are available, the time that you have to launch a survey. Oftentimes, we all know that conducting surveys, we really need to be extremely precise about the length of the measure. So depending on how much time do we have, how much resources we have, and the findings from the previous stages, findings from the pilot testing, we can then take a call on which questions can we drop. So this is where pilot testing becomes super important, because we have data from, let's say, about 50 respondents, 100 respondents, or something like that. And we can really look at individual items and see whether which of the items are not contributing as much to the measure. So we can test for reliability and see if there is a particular item that is not hanging well together with the rest of the items. We can drop that. We can see if there is a particular item that is very redundant. That's very similar to another question that asks a very similar thing. So we can drop those questions. So this is the stage where we cut a lot of the items that we had started with. And cutting questions is always based on findings from the pilot interview and findings from the reliability and from those data. And finally, we have conducting the field study with reliability and validity testing. So this is the moment of truth. We launch our fieldwork. We collect data. Here, I think one tip that I have learned the hard way is that real-time monitoring really helps a lot with kind of ensuring good quality data. And a tip that I would want to share with you all is that when you are monitoring a particular measure in a survey, always try to test reliability while the data collection is going on, so that we have an option of going back and retraining the field, or if there is an issue in understanding questions or in administering questions, we can address that while the field work is going on. A lot of times we let the data collection go on and we test for reliability and validity at a later stage. I would urge that during the monitoring, during data collection, we also keep on checking whether the reliability scores are optimal, and if validities are in the ballpark where we expect them. So I'll stop at that stage, and I think Jennifer talked about this. So the psychometric score that you see, it's kind of a summation of the of adherence to the 10 steps that we talked about, and each of our measure pages essentially summarizes how strong a particular measure is in terms of its reliability and validity scores. Next slide. Yeah, and at the bottom of each of our measures pages, we have a detailed description of, whether formative research was done or not, how strong was the reliability of a measure, how strong was the validity of a measure, and so on. So you can see that in each of our measures. If we go on to the next slide. Yeah, Jen, how much time do we have? Do we have time for a? Okay. Yeah, let's skip the pit stop in that case. I think we are for time. What I would reiterate is that a measure may be reliable, but it may not capture what we intend to capture. So a set of items can hang together well, but they may not capture what we intend to capture. That is, it's not valid. At the same time, a measure may capture what we intend to capture, but the items might not hang together well, as we saw in the time use example. They were all talking about time use, but they did not really. So one of the question was really the odd one out. So good measures need to be reliable as well as valid. It's not an either or. We need both reliability and validity for a measure. So with that, I'll stop and move to the next slide, which I believe, is open for Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions. I'll be happy to repeat or answer queries. Yes, thanks, Jen. We'll also be happy to walk through any of the sections on the website, anything that you want us to lay special emphasis on. We can always do that. Please feel free to chat. Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you, Anab. Does anyone have a question for Anab and the Emerge team? Please feel free to unmute and throw in your question.
Thank you, Anab. This is Rose from SDG Kenya Forum. You mentioned about doing real-time monitoring, and I wanted to just have a feel about some of the tools you use for real-time monitoring. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. This is of really great interest to me. So what I generally do is we do a couple of different tools. So the first tool is about is to create sort of a tracking sheet. So a tracking sheet of some of the critical indicators of your survey and some of the indicators of sample coverage. So these two are the most important things that we need to track on a real-time basis. So for example, if we are currently doing a survey in India, where it is really important that in every village, we cover, let's say, 10 households. So real-time monitoring would be that I have a tracking sheet of all the villages that we are going to, and how many households were covered in each village, so that we are able to identify during the data collection if there is any village where we fell short hugely, right? So if we intended to capture 10 households, whether if there is any village that went to only, like that was able to cover less than 8 households, for example. So we flag that and immediately talk to our field team so that we can remedy that. So that's one sort of tracking. Another sort of tracking is indicator tracking. So for example, if I'm doing a survey on maternal and child health, and I know that, let's say, institutional delivery in my context is somewhere around 60% to 70%. So I track that indicator regularly during fieldwork, let's say every 3 to 4 days. And if the overall coverage of institutional delivery is widely out of range, so for example, if I find that during data collection, institutional delivery was like 90% or 20%, that would be a red flag for me. So I'll immediately stop data collection and I'll talk to my field teams in saying that, hey, how is this question being asked? How is this question being interpreted? So that is another form of monitoring. In the context of reliability and validity, real-time monitoring is so an easy thing to do is to just look at the data that is coming in and simply test the Cronbach alpha, which is Cronbach alpha is a measure for internal reliability of a set of items. So let's say we have a survey on time use and we have 5 questions. And if those 5 questions have high internal reliability, that is, if those 5 questions really hang together well, then the Cronbach alpha score should be really high. It should be more than 0.70, let's say. So one of the things that I always recommend doing is that when the data is coming in, always and simply run Cronbach's alpha. It's really easy to do. There are a lot of statistical packages that require just one line of code to do that. And if you find that Cronbach alpha is, let's say, 0.3, 0.2, it's really, really low, then you can identify early on that there's something wrong going in the data collection process. Either our investigators are not able to explain the question properly, or the respondents are not able to understand or interpret it in the way that we want it to be. And what it sort of ends up and what we can do then, I mean, if we kind of identify that early on, then we can take steps like we can retrain our survey teams, or we can sort of halt data collection for a while and then do more qualitative interviews with our respondents to understand our questions better, and so on. So those would be some of the examples. And I just wanted to clarify one more thing for everyone. I mean, I have been using this term hang together well really frequently. And by that, what I mean is, I'll go back to the example of those 4 time use questions. Jennifer, if you can go back to that slide with that red question. A little before this. A little ahead. Yeah. I think this is before step 1, right before step 1. Yeah, yes, exactly. So if you look at the first 4 questions, so these 4 questions don't hang together well. I mean, they are not like totally related to each other. But the first 3 questions, they are really related to each other. So we have a really consistent way of asking the question. We are saying, how much time does it take you to collect water, collect firewood, perform household chores? So these 3 questions, and these 3 questions are all related to a specific activity about household chores. So the first 3 items, they hang together well. But when we add this 4th question, what do you do with your free time? Then this makes, I mean, the 4 questions taken together, they don't really hang together well. They are not really interconnected, interrelated. And that is what happens when we have inconsistent questions added to our list of items. It kind of takes down the internal reliability. So if I just administer the first 3 questions in the survey, I would guess that my internal reliability would be very high. Whereas if I administer the 4 questions together, and I analyze the 4 questions together, I'll find that the internal reliability goes down drastically. It would reduce exponentially if I add the 4th question. So that is exactly what I meant by items hanging together well and internal reliability. And this is something that we can that we should actually incorporate in our monitoring when data collection goes on. Thanks. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Arden. This is Festus Odingo from the forum as well. And my question still on the same. I know assessing the reliability of study findings sometimes is a bit more tricky, and especially in judging the soundness of the research in relation to the application and appropriateness of the methods undertaken, and the integrity of even the final conclusions. But my worry is in the qualitative research, and I know even some of the listeners would be quite interested to really know how to demonstrate rigor when undertaking qualitative research, which is always challenging because there's no accepted consensus about standards by which such research should be judged. So probably you could shed light on that. I know when doing maybe a bit of qualitative research, others speak about truth value, consistency, neutrality, the applicability. Thank you so much.
That's a really great question, Festus. I can speak to some bits of it. So I think all of those aspects that you talked about are so important, and qualitative research for those reasons are so challenging. So it starts again right at the beginning when we are trying to identify respondents to do qualitative research. At every stage, I agree there's no consensus in the field, but there are guidelines for performing high quality, high standard qualitative research. So, for example, at every stage, right from identifying participants, how do we ensure that our participants are really representative? We are not just going and talking to a particular segment in the community. So, first of all, ensuring that we have a really representative sample, even though it's less in numbers, but we are talking to a wide range of respondents. Taking time to really listen to what our respondents have to say and also asking them back. So I was talking to our colleague recently, and she did a really interesting study, a qualitative study, which I think I would like to share. So she took an existing measure, an existing empirical measure on gender norms, and she went to communities and then talked to specific stakeholders and asked about how each of those questions were being interpreted by the community members. And she found that one of the questions was, and this was about like partner expectations and gender norms around relationships. And she found that one of the questions which the authors had intended to ask uh, uh, in a totally different context was being interpreted very differently by community members, by the respondents. And this is what I mean. This is a great example which bridges empirical research with qualitative research, and sort of constantly tries to link the two and qualitative research can really sort of challenge empirical sort of questionnaires and items as well by taking some of these factors into account, by really listening to sort of respondents and trying to understand how they interpreted trying to understand the context a little better before designing sort of empirical questions. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Sure. It did. Thank you. Thank you, Anab.
Okay, while other questions come in, can we quickly go to the post test? And what we'll do this time is to sort of post individual links to individual questions. So again, we'll have 3 questions that appeared in the post test. It's completely anonymous, so please feel free to respond. This is the first link that is now available in your chats. We should all move together, ideally. Once you're done with responding to the first question, we'll move on to the next question. I hope everyone can see the link to the survey and can access the link to the survey in their chats. All right. Can we move to the next question? Yeah. I'm sorry, I misspoke. We just have one link. You can use the same link and move to next questions. Awesome. And can we move to the final question as well? Perfect. Thank you, everyone. We can go back to the slides. I think the link might be still active. But yeah, I think this brings us to the end of our session. We would really urge you to go check our website out. It's Jennifer, can we do the next slide, please? Please feel free to use the Emerge platform. It's completely free to use, and we are constantly adding new measures and like a lot of additional features. Within a few months, we'll work towards and like adding and improving a lot of existing features. So please feel free to keep using it and let us know about how you use it and how you feel it could be like further improved. We currently have slightly over 800 measures around gender equity and empowerment. And as Jennifer said, we add measures every week. So it's a highly updated source to use and adapt measures. Please also feel free to register with the site to receive constant updates. And we are always looking forward to profile researchers and users and measure development. So if you have your own measures that you want us to include on Emerge, or if you have some good measure that you really like and think should be added to our website, please feel free to send us those as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sarah to close the session. Thank you, everyone. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anab, and thank you so much, everyone. I note that we are over time, so I'll make this very brief and short. It's been such an informative session, and I just want to appreciate everyone, and more so the Emerge team, for having put this training together, the content, the objectives, and being available to walk us through the different session. For me, I've just realized how robust the Emerge site is, and how it's very useful and informative for researchers and for programmers, and how you've been able to pull everything together for us and make our work easy. So I'm sure that many of us will be camping on your website, basically when we are developing questions for our various studies, and to basically see how we can be able to quantify and create measures on the various issues that you want to research and program on. And even basically to understand more on this topic. So I just appreciate the robustness of the site, and it being very easy to follow and to use, and how brilliantly you've been able to take us through. I know that many of us might want to dig more on the psychometrics, and the more complex levels of the measure development. So we may be reaching out to you in the near future for you to provide us with probably additional training for us to be able to, still up our game on this. So I would really want to take this opportunity to appreciate all of us for having made time and taken part in the session. We acknowledge that you all have busy schedules, but you took time to register, to join, and even to stay to this very end. And this was a very, very fast, inaugural capacity strengthening session. So we really do acknowledge and appreciate your effort in this. So we want to say a very big thank you to the Emerge team. You've worked with us in the development of this session. You've worked to put together the content, and especially taking the time and being up so early. I know that in your time zone, I know some of you are up and online by around 5:30 a.m. So we truly, truly do appreciate the entire team, the dedication, and for burning the midnight and even the morning oil to basically get this done. Yeah, like I've just mentioned, I know this training has just scratched the surface. So we will be reaching out to you and, linking up with our members. I know a lot of us had, registered to undertake the training, but most of us sent the apologies late, just before we began. So we will be sharing the recording with everyone who had registered for the training. We will appreciate the training materials that you have developed. So we shall also be sending them through. So that they can, reach out to us and to you, should they have more questions on or want to engage further. So we are looking forward to more exciting sessions in the future. Our next session will be on the 31st of May. Our first session, our second session for capacity building. In that session, we will be looking at documenting best practices for WE. So basically how to develop impactful policy briefs, technical briefs, position papers. So we will be sending out messaging with, regarding to that, and sharing more information about registration and how that entire session will be coined. We also kindly remind you of our webinar on the 18th of May. where we will have the World Bank Group team who will be disseminating findings and sharing insights from their latest report on women, business, and the law. So they will be taking us through some of exciting findings that impact on our work with regards to, unpaid care, women's employment, women's entrepreneurship, and, how these different issues affect the economic opportunities for women. So just to sum it all is to thank you all for being here today and to wish you a very good evening, a good day to those whose morning is just beginning. Let's keep communicating, let's keep connecting on email, and please reach out to us should you need any support that we can offer. So thank you all, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.